It was late evening when the last bus rumbled through the quiet outskirts of the city, the kind of hour when streetlights hummed louder than traffic and passengers sat silently with heavy breath and heavier thoughts. Among them was a young woman in a faded blue sweater, her head resting against the window, eyes fluttering shut despite her obvious effort to stay awake. She clutched a worn backpack to her chest as if afraid it would slip from her hands, but exhaustion finally won, and her breathing softened into the rhythm of deep sleep. The conductor glanced her way but didn't bother waking her. Most people didn't. In a world rushing forward, sleeping souls were simply passed by. Except for the man sitting 3 seats behind her, quiet, observant, his hands wrapped around a paper cup of lukewarm tea, eyes following her with a kind of concern he couldn't quite explain. He had seen her earlier at the station, tired, lost in thought, almost stumbling as she boarded. Something told him she wasn't just tired, she was worn down to the very bone. And he had a feeling she couldn't afford to miss her stop tonight. As the bus rocked gently through dimly lit neighborhoods, the woman's breathing remained steady, unaware that the driver had already passed 2 stops she probably intended to take. The man leaned slightly forward, debating whether to wake her, but strangers didn't always welcome kindness, and he didn't want to frighten her. Still, he kept an eye out the window, watching familiar landmarks disappear behind them. The bus was nearly empty now, only the hum of the engine and the sigh of cold wind slipping through the edges of the window filled the silence. The man checked his phone but couldn't focus. Something tugged at him, a quiet insistence that he shouldn't look away. People often talked about gut feelings, instincts, invisible alarms in the chest. This was his, and when the bus rolled past the last major stop before the route turned toward the outskirts, he knew she was in trouble. She wasn't just asleep, she was helpless. He rose slowly from his seat and stepped closer, careful not to startle her. Her face looked peaceful but weary, the kind of tired that didn't come from a long day but from long months of struggle. He noticed her shoes, scuffed, unevenly worn, her backpack with frayed straps, her fingers slightly trembling even in sleep. The bus driver glanced at him through the mirror, eyebrow raised, as though silently asking what he was doing. He raised a reassuring hand, signaling everything was all right. The driver shrugged and returned his eyes to the road. The man hesitated before gently saying, "Excuse me, miss." But she didn't stir. He spoke a little louder, but still nothing. Her exhaustion was too deep. So he made a decision, an instinctive one, simple but resolute. He wouldn't let her be left alone tonight. The bus reached the final stretch where the neighborhoods gave way to darker, lonelier roads. The next stop was barely illuminated, and few people ever got off there. The conductor called out mechanically, hardly caring who stepped down. But the man approached him quietly and explained that the girl had missed her stop and was still sleeping. The conductor shrugged, muttering that it wasn't his responsibility and people should stay awake. The man's jaw clenched at the coldness of the response, but he kept calm. "At least wait a minute," he insisted softly. "Let me try waking her again." The conductor rolled his eyes but tapped the driver's shoulder to hold the door. The man knelt beside her seat, the dim bus lights casting soft shadows across her pale face. This time he spoke gently but firmly, tapping the seat near her elbow. Her eyelids quivered. Slowly, like someone struggling through layers of exhaustion, she opened her eyes. Confused, she blinked at him, then at the nearly empty bus, then the dark window. Fear shot through her expression instantly. "My stop? Did I miss it?" she asked, voice cracking. The man nodded apologetically. "A few stops back. You fell asleep. It's okay. I didn't want you to wake up alone on an empty bus in the middle of nowhere." Her face fell as she realized how far they had gone. She pressed a shaky hand over her mouth, overwhelmed. "I can't afford a taxi back. I can't," she whispered, more to herself than to him. Her panic was raw, real, and something in him softened even more. "It's all right," he said calmly. "Get down with me. We'll walk to the main road. I won't leave you alone." At first she hesitated, unsure whether to trust a stranger. The world hadn't given her many reasons to. But something in his voice, steady, warm, unhurried, calmed her. She nodded slowly, gathering her backpack with trembling fingers. The man offered his hand to steady her as she stood, and though she hesitated, she took it. Her touch was cold, fragile. They stepped off the bus into the crisp night air, the engine rumbling behind them before roaring away, leaving them standing in the soft glow of a flickering streetlight. The emptiness around them felt heavy. She hugged her backpack close and looked around anxiously. "This area isn't safe this late," he said quietly. Let's walk toward the main road. It's brighter there. She nodded, still shaken and embarrassed. She kept apologizing, but he kept telling her she didn't need to. People get tired, he reminded her. That's human. They began walking, their shadows stretching long across the cracked pavement. She walked slightly behind him at first, still wary, but gradually they fell into step side by side. Her breathing slowly steadied as she realized he wasn't rushing her, wasn't judging her, wasn't trying to invade her space. He was simply there. They walked in silence for a while until she finally found the courage to speak. Thank you for noticing. Most people wouldn't. He shrugged lightly. Most people are tired too. But sometimes kindness is the easiest thing we can give. She gave a small, sad smile. It's been a long time since anyone gave me anything. Her voice cracked, and she quickly wiped her eyes with the back of her sleeve. He pretended not to notice to spare her embarrassment. The night breeze carried the faint scent of rain, and somewhere in the distance, a dog barked. For a moment, they walked like two strangers bound by the same quiet loneliness. As they neared the main road, she began to relax, though her exhaustion still clung to her like weight. She confessed she had been juggling 2 jobs, rushing from one shift to another, barely sleeping. I thought I could stay awake, she said with a broken laugh. Turns out I couldn't. He listened without interrupting. You shouldn't apologize for being human, he said gently. You did your best. She looked at him with gratitude that words couldn't capture. By the time they reached the main road, the streetlights were brighter, traffic louder, and the world felt safer. She exhaled deeply, relief softening her features. My house is still far, she said softly. I usually walk from here. For a moment he hesitated, not wanting to overstep. I can walk with you if you want, he offered. But only if you're comfortable. She studied him for a long second before nodding. I'd really appreciate that. They continued their journey, this time with her steps growing steadier. She began sharing small pieces of her life, her sick mother, her long commute, her hope of saving enough to study again someday. He listened, genuinely, offering no judgment, only quiet understanding. She wasn't used to that. Most people dismissed her as invisible. But with him, she felt seen. The night air grew colder, and the man noticed her shivering. Without making a scene, he draped his jacket over her shoulders. She froze. I can't take this, she protested weakly. It's okay, he said softly. You need it more right now. Her eyes filled again, but this time with something warmer than fear, gratitude. As they walked through narrower streets, she admitted she had missed her stop once before and had been stranded for hours, afraid and alone. I told myself I'd never let it happen again, she whispered. But tonight, I just couldn't keep my eyes open. He gave her a gentle, reassuring smile. Everyone breaks sometimes. You're allowed to. Eventually they reached the small neighborhood where she lived. Older houses, dim lights, uneven roads. She slowed down, almost reluctant for the walk to end. This is me, she said quietly, pointing to a small gate. He nodded. I'm glad you got home safe. She hesitated before speaking again. If you hadn't woken me, I don't know what would have happened. She removed his jacket and held it out to him, but he shook his head. Keep it, he insisted. For nights like this. She clutched it to her chest, overwhelmed. I don't know how to thank you, she whispered. He just smiled. You already did, by reaching home safely. For a long moment they stood in silence under the dim streetlight, two strangers brought together by chance and kindness. She wanted to say more but couldn't find the words. Instead, she whispered, "Good night." He nodded and started to leave, but not before giving her one last reassuring smile. She watched him walk away until he disappeared into the distance, then leaned against her gate, exhaling shakily. For the first time in a long time, she felt something she had forgotten: safety. Kindness. Humanity. She looked down at the jacket still wrapped around her shoulders and smiled through her exhaustion. Inside her small home, she placed the jacket carefully on a chair like something precious. Her mother noticed and asked where it came from. She simply replied, "Someone kind." And for the first time in months, she fell asleep with a calm heart. Meanwhile, the man walked back toward the station under the quiet night sky, his steps steady, his heart lighter. He didn't know her name, where she worked, or what tomorrow would bring. But he knew he had done the right thing. And sometimes, that was enough. And though they went their separate ways, the night held their story like a gentle reminder that even in a fast, uncaring world, kindness still existed. Sometimes all it took was noticing one tired stranger asleep on a bus and deciding they shouldn't face the world alone.